In what was a somewhat surprising move, on Friday, it was announced that Missouri State was going to move from FCS to FBS and become a member of Conference USA, which I guess isn't really all that big of a shock. There had been a lot of talk and discussion about that potentially being something, or that being a match that made a lot of sense, was Missouri State moving to Conference USA if they were going to be an FBS school, or if Conference USA was going to look at expansion members, that Missouri State was going to be a likely option. And it really is interesting because outside of the one season that Bobby Petrino coached Missouri State, they have not been good. They've not been great. They have not been good. And yet they still find the value in moving up and being an FBS member, paying the $5 million fee that the NCAA is now imposing. And the longer that fee, if we can quick sidebar, the longer that fee doesn't seem to be a barrier, I wonder, because Missouri State moved up, Delaware moved up. If they have $5 million, I have to assume that eventually North Dakota State has that money. South Dakota State has that money. North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana State, some of the FBS or FCS, I beg your pardon, some of those bigger and better FCS schools, Illinois State. You would think maybe they eventually, if they find the money, or if they look at the increased exposure for schools like Jacksonville State or Sam Houston or Tarleton State or Missouri State and Delaware, if they eventually view that as, oh, you know what, like, because right now the barrier has sort of always been North Dakota State can win the national championship and be an FCS power, just be a gigantic 1,000-pound gorilla that everybody else in the division has to tackle. And if they move up to FBS, they're not really going to have the opportunity to compete for national championships. And so they stay in the FCS, which is a good fit for them. They continue to get games against really good FBS opponents. Like, they start the season against Colorado on a Thursday night. That, don't be surprised if it's on national TV, and don't be surprised if North Dakota State wins that game. But they continue to get really good Power 5 games out of the deal, because in some cases, playing North Dakota State in your schedule is going to be viewed as a tougher game than a school from the Conference USA, from the MAC, from the Sun Belt, Mountain West, American. North Dakota State has name recognition, cachet, and people understand and appreciate what playing an opponent like that looks like. And they continue to win games against Power 5 schools. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you, like, well, North Dakota State joined the Big 12. They might be. Like, I'm not going to tell you that. I don't think that's fair, right, whatever the case may be. But can North Dakota State move up to FBS and win the MAC? Yeah, probably. Compete for the MAC? Yeah. Compete for Conference USA? I think so, yeah, without question. And I wonder if that top upper echelon of FCS looks at schools like, in Delaware for a long time was an FCS power, but Missouri State, by really no stretch of the imagination, fits that bill. They don't fit the, like, that's a program that's had a lot of success in FCS. No, they really haven't. But being an FBS school brings with it a lot that obviously Missouri State values. But the one thing that I really wonder is if a group of 5 playoff happens. And we talked about it in the past, that Derek Dooley, the former Louisiana Tech and Tennessee coach, is trying to get the wheels kind of turning of, let's have a group of 5 playoff. Let's just recognize where you are in the hierarchy of college football. Appreciate that it's not where you'd like it to be, and just have your own championship. Should that happen, Do the schools in the SWAC, the HBCU schools, and the schools in the Big Sky / Missouri Valley Football Conference, do they then have questions they have to answer? Because I think you do. I think if you have built your brand and used the reasoning of we can be competitive and win national championships at this level, and then you're a quasi Division II school at that point, because if FBS is going to split into essentially two divisions, then there's FCS, Division II, Division III. It's really Division I, Division I AA, Division II, Division III, Division IV. You're a Division II school at that point. And I think it would be really enticing. I think North Dakota State, South Dakota State, Montana, I think those schools have an opportunity to play with the Coastal Carolinas and Tulanes and Liberties and Toledos of the world. I think they have that ability and that opportunity. I think they can recruit well enough. They can compete financially, facilities. I don't know if they can compete NIL, but I don't know how much NIL money there is in the group of 5 level to begin with. I think you can compete at those levels. So I think the move of Missouri State, and it's not going to be an automatic, a quickly like, okay, it happened on May 9th by Memorial Day. Well, you'll have 6 other members joining in Conference USA, the MAC, whatever the case may be. But I can't help but think that if you are one of the top dogs in in the FCS, you can't look at somebody who has not particularly been good and see them move up and sit back and go, yeah, I'm fine with that. That's great. Whatever. I don't know how you sit there and watch that happen and not get a little bit envious, but a little bit like, you know what? Like, get that chip on your shoulder of, we'll show them. If Missouri State thinks they're good enough to play in FBS, then what are we doing? Isn't that a question that Idaho has to ask, that Idaho State, Eastern Washington? Aren't those the questions those teams have to ask? And don't you have to get kind of motivated? You know what? Screw it. We're all moving up. We're all going up. And I realize that it's now a hindrance of having to find a $5 million cash payment, but also having to invest in more scholarships. They took away the attendance requirement that you had to have a minimum of 15,000 fans at your games, which was dumb. Hawaii was going to struggle with that because they're playing in a stadium that's a temporary spot. UMass had trouble with that. But nonetheless, while making it financially more difficult to move up to FBS, the NCAA has made it easier in virtually every other aspect to move up to that level. And I just don't know how much longer you're going to see schools that could be deemed as inferior. Like, for instance, there are a lot of people who believe that Eastern Kentucky could be the next school to move up, and that Eastern Kentucky and Western Kentucky could be a package deal to the Mid-American Conference. There are people who believe that because Western Kentucky and Middle Tennessee State almost joined the MAC when it looked like Conference USA was going to go under. And now UMass has joined the MAC. The MAC could be looking to continue to add schools, and that Western and Eastern could be a natural fit for the Mid-American Conference. If you are one of the best teams in the FCS, and the last 3 schools that moved up were Delaware, Eastern Kentucky, and Missouri State, and you have trophies in your trophy case over the last decade, over the last 15 years, isn't it really difficult to watch those schools move up? If you're the head coach at that school, isn't it difficult to not go to your athletic director or the president of your university and say, it's kind of embarrassing that these schools that aren't nearly as good as we are at this sport are going to be playing on the same level as Alabama and Notre Dame and USC and Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State and LSU and Clemson and Florida State. I think that'd be really difficult to not march into the president's office and say, what the hell are we doing? And so I just wonder how much longer you're going to see that clear delineation between FCS and FBS, and if there's going to be an FBS play or if there's going to be a group of 5 playoff. If that momentum starts to build, don't be surprised if there's some momentum of the Missouri Valley, the SWAC. You get some of those really big HBCU schools that have attendance that are better than some top flight group of 5 programs. The SWAC, Missouri Valley, Big Sky. If you don't start to see some of those programs say, we're going to make the jump and we're going to fight with the Americans, Conference USA, Mountain West, etc., to try to win that national championship rather than some of the small private schools. Or if you just flat out see some of the state schools in less populated states or the state schools that are directional or have a city name in them or whatever, just say, you know what, I'm tired of competing with some of these lesser institutions. I'm ready to be on the biggest and brightest stage. And however we got to do that, we're going to do it. I don't think we're too far from that. And I think it's a good thing for the sport overall. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you do so. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content that we are pumping out here on Saturday Glory. If you're listening on the podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. I'll see you tomorrow for another episode of the Daily Huddle here on Saturday Glory.